Hey Georgia, I just read through your draft, did it on paper again, and then scanned and PDF'd the document. So I'm going to kind of walk you through the feedback. Some of it I'm not going to talk about, but I left a reminder from last week or the couple of weeks ago. I'd put this in here, and I added a note about how I think your chapter 3 should be called methodology. Because method is one thing you could call it. Methods is another thing that's commonly called. Methodology, though, includes that ology piece, also includes sort of like that idea that you're explaining why you're doing the methods. The methods are the methods or the procedures, but the ology part kind of explains the why. And so that's why methodology is an appropriate term for chapter 3, especially in a dissertation where you're expected to be explaining the design choices you're making constantly. So that's what I would support for your title for chapter 3, and I believe that the format for the dissertation is that the word chapter 3 is uppercase, 3 is spelled out actually, written out THREE, and then methodology is like a title right under it, I think. But anyway, I kind of wrote it. You'll see in a few pages that I did that. And then as a reminder, I thought this was a good reminder of just kind of like a really pat little format for how the structure in chapter 3. When you say I'm going to do whatever it is, then you define whatever it is, and then you kind of quickly explain why it's appropriate for your study. So that's a good sort of quick formula to kind of remind you, okay, as you continue to flesh out different sections, that's a pretty safe way to address the methodology section generally, like for each paragraph or each section or subsection. So I, just for my own and to help you, I kind of recommended a slightly different order of some of the things that you've presented, and you'll see this order here. This is not how you did it exactly, but so basically the first 3 to 4, well, 3 to 5 sections aren't exactly in this order, and you don't exactly use I don't think all of these different titles. So this is what I'm recommending you do. It's also what I recommend in the marked up document. We'll look at it in a second. And then I also write some sort of bigger picture feedback to clarify, because sometimes you might not know what am I talking about on the actual document that we're about to look at. And then here was like something, for example, that was too long for me to write on the document, and I was able to copy paste it from somewhere else, but it helps with this section on the qualitative case study, because you should have a section where you very clearly explain to us what the qualitative case study actually is. If you look at your paper right now, you haven't done that. You have a section called qualitative case study, but you talk about other things. So we'll get there in a second. So yeah, so I do give more specific feedback in these under these sections. There was a section called research questions. I do think you should move that to end of chapter 2. I know in the previous set of feedback I said maybe check with Dr. Varga and Dr. Delba, but I would say just do it for now, and then if Dr. Delba or another member of our committee, if we get one, insists it must be in 3, that's fine. It's really almost the same thing if it's at the end of chapter 2 or at the beginning of 3, but really that lit review is supposed to lead to those questions. So that's a good spot. Let's put that there and just not even worry about putting it into chapter 3 until someone really needs you to do that. So yeah, I talk about the research design and procedures, give you a few tips there. Like this is an example of a tip that's hard for me to explain in the body, but I think that in this section you should have context first, kind of start with where are we doing this, then so context is big, right? And then sampling, how are you going to choose the people you want to participate, and then recruitment, that's how you're going to entice them, and how you're going to assure them that you're an ethical researcher with your IRB and all that kind of stuff. So I think that that's a good order in which to do those sections. This is a really important one as well, the unit of analysis. You don't actually do that. Oh, and I have another document. That reminds me, I have another document that I did not share with you. So I need to pause and get that really quickly. Okay, so I just went and got this brainstorm doc. I had brainstormed different ways for you to create your bounded system, because right now you don't have a bounded system created or defined very clearly. And that's your unit of analysis, your bounded system for your case study. So I think you need to really think about that now. Think about what you want to get out of this study, and then pick how you're going to structure that unit of analysis. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Proposed data collection procedures. Interviews, let's see here. Okay, yeah, I'll give you some tips about putting that data tool section into the interviews, because the data tool section that you have, pages 10 to 11, is actually about your interview. And data tool is kind of an awkward, or I mean, I've not heard that expression before, and I'm sure that came from a book that you've used or a class you've taken. It's probably completely legitimate, but in qualitative research, what you're describing is more like an interview protocol or something related to the instrumentation for your interview. So if there's something else a little more in line with like maybe what Miriam would describe when she's talking about interview protocols, or Creswell or Stake, maybe those would be better terms than data tool, because I just think that throws the reader off. You'll notice that I strongly recommend that you do not record observations. I think that it makes teachers uncomfortable. It makes IRBs harder to get through. And I think though that recording, audio recording of interviews is, and I talk about it here, that's more understood to be something that if you're interviewing someone, that an audio recording is pretty reasonable, but it still gives a level of privacy where you're not taking a kid's likeness on a camera and you're carrying it back to your house and putting it on the internet where somebody can steal it from you, kind of thing, through the web. I think people are more comfortable with audio recordings than video generally. I think they're going to be okay with you audio recording an interview or a focus group. But I really do think you should get rid of the video recording idea altogether. I think that when you go into those classrooms to do your observations, that you're going to find, so long as you're able to write fairly quickly, and I don't know if there might be something that stops you from doing that. And if there is, then maybe video recording is necessary. But you should be able to jot down a lot of stuff. You will be scribbling on your notepad, and by the time you're done with each observation, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, now I have to go type all this up, and I've got a lot of information here. And you're going to find that you actually have a lot of information just from handwritten notes. So I recommend you don't do any recording of that, because it's just, all of it honestly becomes too much data. You don't need to do it to understand what you're seeing, but you do need to write down very clearly and in a very prepared kind of way. You have to have your stuff ready before you go in. Take good notes, and that's really all you need to do. And then when you're done, one of your practices with observations would be to read through those notes, because you can't always write everything you want, but while your memory's still fresh after an observation, go in and add more to your notes immediately. Say, I'm going to sit down for 30 minutes after the observation, and I'm going to go flesh out the notes. I'm going to go jot extra notes in the corner, or clarify things where I abbreviated and didn't spell something out because I was writing so fast. And that will be a ton of data. Even from one observation, you will have a ton of data. So again, I don't really think you need to be video recording an observation, but anyway, you get my meaning. I thought we had kind of talked about maybe an open-ended pre and post test to examine learners' thoughts and perceptions about CS at the beginning and end. It could be an open-ended prompt. It could be something that the whole class does, and then the teacher just gives you the ones for the students that you're allowed to study. And then document collection, I still am not seeing a section on that. You'll probably have at least 2 documents that you can include in your data collection. You're going to have a syllabus, I bet, and at least one assignment from the observation that you're going in to see. But I would predict that you would have at least 20 documents that you collect in that classroom. I don't know what they'll be, but it's just teachers generate many, many documents, as you know, every week. And so there will be lots of things for you to collect, especially if you go in and do multiple observations. So do have a section on that. Journals. It could be possible that this is a form of data collection where students reflect on their work, or maybe they're asked to reflect on computational artifacts that they make. There may be some way where the teacher is having them reflect or journal or respond to their own work. And that could be a form of data collection. You might put it in there just sort of hopefully and just very briefly, like a short paragraph for now, just so you don't forget that it's something you might want to collect. You can always cut out, one or two of these forms of data if you need to. I would say that you probably need at least two forms of data to make it a case study, but really I think 3 is a better number. So like we know you're going to have a couple documents, if not up to 100. It just, again, I don't know. So you're going to have interviews, observations at this point, and probably some documents. There may be some other forms of data you can collect. Also, under observations, I think I told you, yes, to add photographs. That when there's no students in there, you should go around and just familiarize yourself with the classroom and take pictures of its layout and the way it's decorated and, so that you remember exactly what it's like. If you can, take pictures of the hallway of the school. You don't have to include this in your study. You're not going to, because you could argue that that's identifiable information, but it's just for you and your notes, so that when you're writing at home, you remember, oh, the desks are like situated so that people sit in groups of 2. Things that you might not be able to remember exactly as well without a photograph. Well done on a lot of these sections. I did say well done here on the role of the researcher section. I think that we're seeing a lot of steady progress in this version. Proposed data analysis plan. When I read this, I get the sense that you're not quite sure what thematic analysis is yet. That you kind of get it. You definitely kind of get it. And you explain it in depth in some places. But I want you to keep, sorry, pulling a phone out of my back pocket. I want you to keep reading. I want you to take some time this weekend and week to read about thematic analysis. I've scanned a chapter by Miles Huberman and Saldana. They are the kings, I guess. I think they're all men of qualitative methods right now. I mean, they're like one of the top 2 or 3 like expert groups on qualitative data analysis. So I scanned chapter 4 for you of this handbook. This book's great. It's the Methods Source Book. And so chapter 4 is all about the fundamentals of qualitative data analysis. So it'll explain thematic analysis in a slightly different way. I know that I'd given you Brown and Clark as I think Brown and Clark's a fantastic overview of thematic analysis. And I've actually used Brown and Clark in combination with Saldana. So whatever you end up doing, I just want for now, I want to make sure it makes sense to you what this process is. When I read your data analysis section, I'm not sure I'm clear that it's making sense to you yet. It's possible that in a meeting soon that I try to walk you through it a little bit, that I open up a data analysis software package and we go analyze some data so that you can kind of see the process. Unfortunately, the process is not totally as straightforward as it's ever written out to be in a research study. It's kind of messy, but it's all about you synthesizing what you're reading and finding the patterns in it. And so you don't have to use even the techniques as complex as what are written in Brown and Clark or what is written in this chapter 4 that I'm giving you. It can actually be done with much simpler techniques that involve just simple, I mean, they're hard to explain, but you can do it just using Microsoft Word and color coding, that kind of thing. But I think that the tools like NVivo and maybe the tool that you're picking to use, I think they can often facilitate a little more sophisticated level of analysis. So, okay. So no recommendations on your trustworthiness section at this time and everything that follows it. Those recommendations will come later. I think we need to really focus on this other stuff first. And I've read that section a couple weeks ago, and I looked at it today, but it seems mostly the same, and I think that it's good for now. So we'll pay attention to that a little more as we refine chapter 3. Okay, so read chapter 4 of Miles Huberman, etc. Go back and update your chapter 1 purpose statement. Please include chapter 1 and 2 in your next version that you share. I made some comments on your interview questions, and I want you to check out some case study articles that I downloaded. I'm going to make a second video for you now.